This week on Viewpoints.
You could tell when he thought your answer was particularly bad or if he thought you were a little eccentric.
We look back on the legacy of this host and the iconic game show that's unlike anything else on TV. Then,
he would have never, ever criticized other leaders publicly or, defended himself. He didn't think that was appropriate.
He led a revolution, shaped a nation, and walked away from power. We'll look back at the legacy of George Washington. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
before reality TV and viral TikTok challenges, there was the game show, a genre built on quick thinking, luck, intelligence, and a little showmanship. From Wheel of Fortune to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, just a handful of these concepts have stood the test of time, but none have blended intellect and entertainment quite like Jeopardy! During each episode, 3 contestants compete against each other by solving clues of varying difficulty across different categories. These clues are all written as answers, while the fastest person to buzz in responds in the form of a question, such as who is or what is. All of the clue categories are revealed at the beginning of each round and can cover a wide array of subjects. Past topics have ranged from famous last words to Cold War culture to the emoji category. Jeopardy is unique in that it's always celebrated intelligence, skill, and strategy, and for the majority of its many seasons, host Alex Trebek has been at the helm. However, in November 2020, Trebek passed away at the age of 80 after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. For many who are diehard fans of Jeopardy, Trebek's talent for hosting was unrivaled and was a big part of what made the show so special.
There are some people who simply were perfect for television in that even though they were being watched by millions and millions and millions of people completely anonymously, they gave a sense that they were talking to you directly, an intimacy like you were, watching them from across the backyard fence as opposed to a television. I think Johnny Carson had this. I think Mr. Rogers had this. Oprah Winfrey certainly had it. And I think Trebek had it as well.
That's Robert Thompson, a professor of television and popular culture at Syracuse University. He remembers Trebek as someone who was able to bring a rare mix of talent, warmth, and seriousness to the role, a balance that few hosts can ever achieve.
There was a sense that people really felt they knew Alex Trebek. And what was interesting, too, is they knew him and they liked him. And this was interesting with Jeopardy because, let's face it, Trebek had a certain degree of pretentiousness. He had a certain degree of being a Mr. Know-it-all. But he managed to be a smart guy that we liked. Oftentimes, we respond very bad to people who are putting on airs of being smart. When you're in school, if you're a smart guy, you tend to get your lunch money stolen. With Trebek, we didn't want to steal his lunch money. We wanted to have lunch with him. He could be both this semi-pretentious Mr. Know-it-all, he's got all the answers kind of guy, but at the same time do it in a way that we respected and that we liked and that didn't put us off or didn't seem elitist, even though he really was a kind of elite sort of guy.
Trebek checked all of the boxes for leading Jeopardy! He had the finesse, charm, and quick thinking that made his role look so effortless and easy. Not many people actually know that there was one other host before Trebek, American actor Art Fleming. He first led Jeopardy! When it came on the air in 1964 and hosted until 1975 when it was canceled. Trebek then took over in 1984 when the show bounced back.
He was the Jeopardy! Host that I grew up with as a kid when I would be staying home from school sick and my mom would bring in the portable television set. It was Art Fleming that I watched on Jeopardy! And I remember when Trebek took over, there was a while in which I thought, what's this guy doing this show? This is supposed to be Art Fleming. It took a year or two before I grudgingly began to admit how really, really perfect Alex Trebek was for that role. But Art Fleming also, from the very beginning of Jeopardy! Was a slightly different kind of game show host. He did have a more, a little more gravitas, a little more seriousness to him. There wasn't quite the kind of crazy, created in the lab game show host kind of feel to him. And of course, game show hosts throughout, we've had those kind of the Peter Marshalls, the Wink Martindales, the Bob Eubanks, that almost have a certain type to them, which is easy to burlesque, easy to make fun of. Jeopardy kind of steered away from that.
When Art Fleming first hosted Jeopardy in the 1960s and 70s, the series drew a loyal audience, but it wasn't a massive hit. That changed with Alex Trebek. His calm confidence and sharp humor helped turn the half-hour broadcast from simple trivia into must-watch TV. And as his fame grew, Trebek became a pop culture figure in his own right, making memorable several guest appearances on sitcoms and talk shows.
He was a voice on The Simpsons, one of the coolest things that anybody can get the opportunity to do, one of the greatest shows in American television history. He also appeared, I think, on Baywatch, one of the not greatest television shows in the history of American TV. The X-Files. I mean, he would pop up in all kinds of interesting places.
Another gig Trebek once said yes to? He was asked to moderate a debate in the race for Pennsylvania governor, but that appearance didn't go so smoothly.
It didn't work very well. Many more people saw that than would have otherwise seen state office debate. And Alex himself kind of apologized for it afterwards. And the fact is, he talked too much. I think somebody made the measurement that he talked 41% of the time that debate was going, which is unusual in that if that was the problem in the debate, that was never the problem in Jeopardy. He had those conversations with people after that first break when he got to know them and everything, and he would make his little comments, sometimes a little snide, as the answers went on. But there was never the sense that he was inserting himself too much into the process. He really realized, he said this many times, that the success of that show was the contestants that they got. And he was right about that. He was only half right because it was the contestants and how Alex managed to bring them out in interesting ways.
The success of the show in the era of Trebek is clear. Another big moment was in January of 2020 when Jeopardy hosted the Greatest of All Time series. These highly anticipated episodes brought back popular contestants like Ken Jennings and James Holzhauer. The limited championship run garnered more than 15 million viewers and surpassed viewership for that year's NBA Finals. For longtime fans, watching the best contestants go head-to-head was peak TV. One Jeopardy superfan is Daniela Regencia, who grew up watching and loving the show. In September of 2020, her own dream came true when she finally made it through the many auditions and was able to compete on the main stage. Looking back, she remembers the day that she got the green light from Jeopardy producers.
I was shaking when I got the call and after. I could not believe it was happening. I thought it was a prank. I had to Google the person who called me just to make sure that I wasn't getting scammed or something. But no, I was not getting scammed, and it was super exciting.
Regencia says because production tapes 5 episodes of Jeopardy in the same day, much of the time is spent waiting around and watching others compete until you're called up to bat.
I didn't film my episode until the 3rd one, and then Alex Trebek walks out. And I think all of us contestants, the first time we saw him, were just oh my goodness, you could kind of feel some excitement and anxiety. In my day of filming, the person I saw who did the best was a fighter pilot because, that's his bread and butter.
The spotlight and pressure of it all definitely plays a role. Sadly, she didn't win her episode, but she'll always remember being able to see Trebek in action during his final months on the show.
What I didn't know before going in was that there's nothing scripted about what he does. He has the question and answer on a large sheet in front of him, but everything in between, the intro to the show, the coming back from the commercials, his conversations with the contestants, no one is feeding him any lines. They don't even know where he's going to stand or how long he's going to talk for. They're all just kind of operating around him and what he's going to do, which I never knew that before going onto the show.
Regencia also remembers Trebek's subtle sass as a host. He wasn't afraid to show his emotions and speak his mind.
You could tell when he thought your answer was particularly bad, or if he thought you were kind of a little eccentric, or he would make his little comments in the episodes when he would ask people for their stories, and He would make his little comments when people gave answers. He was witty, a little snarky, but overall just seemed like a nice guy. And, he always said that he loved his job because he gets to spend all this time with really smart people.
Trebek's career legacy is Jeopardy! Under his direction, the show's popularity rose to new heights and cemented its place as one of the best game shows of all time. Thompson argues that only one other trivia game show really stacks up in comparison.
If you were going to say of the last half century, what are the two game shows that really transcended the genre? It would be Jeopardy and it would be Trebek, but it would also be Millionaire and Regis. That just didn't go as long. I remember the summer of '99 moving into that fall when it was on 7 days a week for those chunks. And you could not go into a diner or a gas station without hearing someone say, "Is that your final answer?" I mean, that everybody was talking about that. That seldom happens with a television show.
However, the popularity of Philbin's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire lasted just a handful of years. The rise and fall of some U.S. series like Millionaire highlights just how important it is to have the right leader. So what led producers to pick Jeopardy contestant Ken Jennings as the next host?
It was almost like Jennings was the surrogate son of Trebek and had his blessing. Jennings was like Trebek 2.0. And we found out when that Holzhauer guy were doing the rounds of the media during the Greatest of All Time tournament that Ken Jennings was actually telegenic. He was good on camera. He could deliver a joke. So I think probably he was the natural, perfect choice. The advantage is that everybody who is a Jeopardy fan will already know Ken Jennings in a Jeopardy context.
Jennings officially took over as permanent host in December of 2023 and has since earned praise for his straightforward, smart demeanor and deep knowledge of the game. However, some longtime fans feel that his delivery and cadence lack the effortless authority Trebek had. Still, ratings have remained steady, and Jeopardy is now in its 42nd season this year. To kick off the new season this past fall, the show has introduced a refreshed studio design and a rise in sponsored clue categories. These are paid segments within the gameplay where brands or celebrities present clues tied to upcoming projects. However, producers maintain that the heart of the show remains the same, and Jennings' steady and familiar presence has helped bridge that tension between tradition and modernization as the game show continues evolving in today's packed TV landscape. To learn more about Jeopardy and Alex Trebek, visit Jeopardy.com. You can also learn more about both of our guests, Professor Robert Thompson and Daniela Regencia, at viewpointsradio.org. This segment was written by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.
Coming up, his face is on the dollar bill, but there's much more to his story. We cover what you've never heard about George Washington when Viewpoints returns. Everyone learns about George Washington, the first president of the United States, at some point or another. It may have been in an early elementary history class, during a visit to Washington, D.C., or if you immigrated to this country while studying for a citizenship exam. In whatever capacity, most learn about Washington through similar facts and major achievements. Some of his best-known accomplishments include winning the American Revolutionary War against the British and helping to form the U.S. government through creation of the Constitution. But these facts and timelines don't really help us grasp who George Washington really was as a person. What were his political views? How did he view his role in government?
All these biographers had said that he was too marble to be real, and we don't know him. And then I would come across something like, he liked Madeira, he liked hoe cakes, he liked to dance, he disliked intimacy with someone he doesn't know, he didn't like idle chatter, he wanted a meritocracy. Those things make him real to us.
That's Alexis Coe, author of the new book, You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington. In it, she delves into who Washington really was as a person and highlights some of the misconceptions around America's founding father. One such false fact was that he was a Republican. In fact, however, Coe says he was a Federalist, but rarely ever publicized himself as one because he disliked the division political parties created.
When he left office, in his farewell address, this was the biggest thing he said. 2 points that feel very relevant to us today. Partisanship is a danger. And if it gets out of control, what you're going to find is parties holding on to power, doing whatever it takes to hold on to power, and basically not getting anything accomplished for people, actual United States citizens, Americans, because they're so busy thwarting each other and getting as much as they can for the people who are supporting them.
Washington was not your typical modern-day politician by any means. He was neutral in many senses and saw himself more as a unifier.
He would have never ever criticized other leaders publicly or, defended himself. He didn't think that was appropriate. He also took his position as the grand unifier quite seriously. We think, okay, everyone wanted independence. Everyone wanted to rebel against the British Empire. That's not true. There were plenty of loyalists. This was essentially a bit of a civil war. That's also why it went on for so long. It wasn't over in a day. It wasn't over in a month. It was over in 8 years, 8 long years. And the country, was sort of taking these alliances into its infancy. The French Revolution happened. Some of the country thought that we should help them out, even though we didn't even have a navy and we weren't stable. We didn't really have money. We were born with enough debt to strangle us. Other people believed that we should maintain ties with the monarchy. And he thought, no, I've got to be neutral. And that's how he operated in every sense of the word.
Another disillusion that many people hold is that George Washington was an unparalleled military leader throughout his life. But Coe says, in fact, he lost more battles than he won.
When he becomes the general, he has been retired from the military since his late 20s, and he's reading books about military service. It's sort of funny. It's like basically military service for dummies. He's reading it and he's catching up as fast as he can. But he had gifted leaders. Benedict Arnold, the reason that hurt so much at the time, a part of it was that he was one of the greatest generals that Washington had. He's not fighting in these battles. He is in a tent most of the time, receiving and writing letters and instructions and asking for supplies and payment. And that is the focus of his military endeavors during the time. I mean, he's retreating. All sorts of things are happening. But for the most part, his mind is elsewhere.
You may not have known that Washington was also a master of spying and the use of propaganda during wartime.
He was obsessed with spying. He was a spy master. He got really into the theatrics of it. He got a lot of good information from it. He also was a master in the court of public opinion. He understood propaganda. So at a certain point, he makes sure that people in the colonies, as they still were, if there are stories of British atrocities, whether they're not following the rules of war because they won't recognize America as a nation, or British soldiers are at one point raping young girls on a farm and dragging them back to their headquarters, Washington knows those stories mean something, and he makes sure that they're printed in the congressional records and then they are disseminated throughout the country, not just to galvanize Americans, because this was a civil war. A lot of people wanted to remain loyal to the crown. They thought they could do things differently. But he needed to show everyone that, look, no matter what you think, you're not safe with British soldiers around. We need to get them out. And he also wanted to show the world, because this is nation building. He thought about the country not just as, okay, we're going to win and then we'll figure it out. He wanted the country to start out as strong as possible.
As we look back on the first commander-in-chief, we remember a true visionary. A fierce leader who was not only focused on winning the war against the British, but determined to shape the country into a dominant and unified force on the world stage. After doing just this, he knew when it was time to bow out of the top position in politics and declined to run for a third presidential term, even though it was within his power. Washington left behind not just a young nation, but a model for leadership rooted in integrity and foresight. His calm decision-making and sense of duty helped define what the presidency could and should be, a role grounded in accountability, unity, and the long-term good of the country. You can learn more about George Washington and our guest, Alexis Coe, by visiting viewpointsradio.org. Also, check out Coe's book, You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington, available online and in select bookstores. This segment originally aired in March of 2020 and was written by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
This is Viewpoints Explained. I'm Ebony McMorris. For much of the 20th century, governments around the world were worried about people having too many kids. Now countries are grappling with the opposite issue. In the U.S. and other developed nations, birth rates are falling fast. Last year, the U.S. hit a record low fertility rate of 1.6 children per woman on average. Go back to 2007, and this same statistical measure was 2.1 children per woman, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. For context, researchers estimate that an average of 2.1 children is what's needed to keep the American population stable without immigration. Head over to South Korea, and the fertility rate has plunged to just 0.7%, and many other countries are showing the same decline. So what's behind the numbers? Economists say it's a mix of rising living costs. Everything from housing to education to basics like food and utilities are getting more expensive. Young people are also waiting longer to get married, and there's a growing level of uncertainty about the future with climate change and growing global tension. Another big driver? More men and women are prioritizing their careers, education, and the freedom that comes with not having children. At the end of the day, deciding whether or not to have kids is a deeply personal decision. But when millions start making the same choice, it adds up. As populations age and shrink, there'll be fewer workers to fund programs like Social Security. Innovation could slow, and entire industries may have to scale back. Some governments have started offering financial incentives to boost birth rates. Countries like Sweden, France, and China are testing new policies like bigger tax breaks and baby bonuses. But so far, no country has figured out how to reverse the trend in a lasting way. Lower birth rates aren't necessarily good or bad, but it does pose new questions. How will current systems adapt to a world where fewer people are entering each generation? That's Viewpoints Explained for this week. More in a moment.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. Director Richard Linklater is the king of low-key. His early films like Slacker and Dazed and Confused paved the way for a whole generation of hangout movies with loose plots, and he's returned to that ethos throughout his career with hits like the Before trilogy as well as Boyhood. But he's also built up a resume as a crowd-pleasing Hollywood director, making School of Rock with Jack Black and The Slick Hitman with Glenn Powell. Linklater's newest film is called Blue Moon, and it straddles the line between both of those worlds, making a big theatrical production starring Ethan Hawke, Andrew Scott, Margaret Qualley, and Bobby Cannavale out of a script that is primarily just people chatting on one fateful night in one fateful bar. Hawke stars as Lorenz Hart, the real-life man who forged a 25-year partnership with composer Richard Rodgers and then watched him write the biggest hit of his career with Oscar Hammerstein. The film follows Hart on the opening night of Oklahoma, and audiences watch as Hawke's heart talks and talks and talks his way through what might be one of the lousiest nights any of us could ever imagine having to endure. Blue Moon is a small movie, but if you're looking to bask in the glory of delicious monologues expertly delivered by an all-star lineup of actors, then you might be in luck. The film marks Richard Linklater's 9th film with star Ethan Hawke, and it continues their tradition of mining incredibly small human moments and putting them up on the big screen. Blue Moon isn't a movie that was built to blow you away, but it might just quietly seduce you if you give it the chance. I'm Evan Rook.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.